of give us the context surrounding the governor's comments we just heard?
Yeah, well, this is something that, this comes after a couple of days of seeing some far-right state Republicans basically calling for any sort of way to either remove Fani Willis from office or discipline her in some sort of way. Now, I think it's important to note that this is not a mainstream call among Republicans in the state house. These are some far-right members of the party, and even some other Republicans have kind of been pushing back against that. But what we saw yesterday from Governor Brian Kemp really was the strongest pushback against that, saying, okay, if you have issues with the way the DA is doing her job, there are proper procedures by which to raise those complaints. But he is not going to call a special session to raise the issue of looking at impeaching her, saying that that would likely be proven unconstitutional. And then, Yasmin, he went a step further and said that he really hasn't seen any evidence that she has violated her oath or done anything improper. So it's certainly very interesting when you see the fact that Governor Kemp pushed back on that and said we're not going to focus on that, because for many people who have watched Georgia over the past few years, we know that that very strongly echoes his pushback against then President Trump, who also called on him to call a special legislative session in order to overturn his election loss here in Georgia. Of course, the governor didn't do it at the time, and that proved to be the beginning of their very strong rift between the two.
We're going to get into that in just a moment, but if you will, Blaine, bring us up to speed on kind of the flurry of legal filings that we've been seeing over the last day or so.
Flurry is a great way to put it, Yasmin. When you talk about 19 defendants in one case, you're going to see this type of thing. But especially at the beginning, a lot of the legal filings have to do with when and how and where this case is going to be tried. So what we've seen and what we're really tracking are those who have waived their right to an arraignment appearance next week. So we know that former President Trump is among them, along with 5 other co-defendants who have waived their right. They've entered a not guilty plea, and they said they're not going to come down here to Fulton County and appear before a judge. The other legal filings, though, that we're seeing are from some defendants looking to sever their case from their co-defendants, saying for whatever reason they don't want to be tried along with everybody else. They want their own trial. The former president is also among them. He said that he doesn't want to be tried with those who have expressed that they want a speedy trial. People like Ken Cheeseborough, who a judge has already said will go to trial on October 23rd. The president and his legal team say they don't have enough time to prepare for a trial when you're talking about something that's less than 2 months away. And then the third bucket of these kind of filings are those who are looking to remove the case to federal court. That's what we're watching very closely, of course, led by Mark Meadows. We know that yesterday, Meadows and his legal team put in a number of supplemental briefs at the request of the federal judge who is overseeing this process. So we are really waiting at any moment, any day, for the federal judge to make a ruling on that motion, Yasmin.
Harry Litman, moving to a federal court, severing cases from others, right to a speedy trial. Give us the 30,000 foot above kind of view of this whole thing with all of these updates. What are you watching specifically for right now in Georgia? What is most important to you?
3,000-foot view is an unbelievable traffic jam with cars piled all on top of each other and uncertain how we're going to unpack them. What I'm watching for is, first, what's going to happen with Mark Meadows? Will he be able to remove? It's very dicey for him. On the other hand, it's a pretty low standard. And if he goes to federal court, Yasmin, there's some suggestion under Georgia law that others have to go with him. That's first. Second, will people be able to sever? Because in a similar way, one defendant has said, I want a speedy trial, and has gotten it as a matter of right. And the people who want to be peeled away from him need to make a specific argument. You can't just get severance automatically. And the one that Donald Trump made yesterday is not the sort of thing that gives you severance. I don't have enough time. You have to show some real problem if you're both tried together. So these are two puzzles for one state court judge and one federal court judge to try to untangle. And it's amazing the stakes of this, teeny little procedural kind of motion. We're all getting our news now with a side order of criminal practice in Georgia, but it really matters.
Harry, I'm glad that you brought up Mark Meadows, because you actually wrote a really brilliant piece in the LA Times, unsurprisingly, about Mark Meadows and kind of the legal defense that it seems as if he is mounting, essentially saying he was just doing his job, right? And I want to read a quote from the piece that you wrote in which you say, it defies credulity to claim that Meadows was inspired by a Boy Scout sense of election integrity to assist Trump's efforts to undo Biden's wins in Georgia and other states. Talk more about this.
Sure. So for not removal, but immunity, which for him is the whole game, he's going to have to show a valid federal purpose. It's not enough to just be raising phone calls. And there are a couple things he had to cop to where he really helped with this false electors effort. And so he had to be asked, what's your purpose there? Because just trying to help the boss doesn't cut it. So he had to say, well, I just wanted to make sure elections were free and fair. And I think the fair response to that by a prosecutor and jury would be, come on, are you kidding us? But he's forced into that if he wants to get not just removal, but immunity, because you have to show a valid federal purpose that the state can't nullify. So that to me was a big tell that, why did he take this huge risk of testifying just because he wants to be in federal court without cameras? No, that doesn't make sense. He did it because he's, gambling the House and on trying to get immunity, meaning the whole case would go away.
Peter Baker, to talk to us about how televising this trial, live streaming this trial, different from the 3 others that will take place as well, will set this apart from everything that Donald Trump is facing.
Yeah, exactly. This would be the first time, of course, we see it play out that way because the federal courts do not have cameras in the courtroom. We don't believe the New York State trial, if that goes forward, would have cameras in the courtroom. So you'd have the nation literally watching day after day, perhaps week after week. This could be a very long trial. Watching the evidence presented, watching the witnesses provide their testimony, watching the president scowl as you show him in that courtroom sketch right there in a very real-time way. And this would be playing out, presumably, in the thick of an election campaign in which he would much prefer, of course, to be on the road at various rallies. And I don't think we can think of anything that would be quite comparable in American history, perhaps that most of the Watergate hearings in 1970s in front of the Senate. But we've never seen a trial of this import on live television, on live streaming that the American public could watch. And at the time that they're deciding not just whether Donald Trump is guilty, but whether he should be president again.